name is Ella Kate Marisi, and you are listening to More Than Child's Play with your host, my mommy, Lacey Marisi, and my Aunt Nicole Surgeon. They are authors, therapists, and most importantly, mommies. And man, can they talk. So sit back and relax and learn from their village. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to More Than Child's Play podcast. This is your host, Lacey Marisi, pediatric speech language pathologist. And this episode is about a topic area that is very personal to me and one that I'm very excited to discuss and share with you along with our guest today, Jeanette Washington. Welcome, Jeanette.
Why, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So Jeanette Washington, MED, has worked as a speech and language pathologist, software engineer, and educator. She empowers those with special abilities to pursue employment in the tech industry. Jeanette's love for technology is documented in her book, Technical Difficulties: Why Dyslexic Narratives Matter in Tech. Currently, she works within the intersection of technology, accessibility, and social justice. I discovered Jeanette on that crazy, wild, wonderful world of Instagram, and I was drawn to her account because I could tell from some of the things she was posting and sharing that she was a speech and language pathologist. So she shares lots of good information about communication development and strategies and building expressive language, especially as ones I've noticed. You have these cute little graphics I love with age of sound development norms and age that sounds should come in. I mean, she has tons of cute graphics. You have that wonderful graphic that I would love. I've saved it in every account I can save it in. That kind of breaks down what a morpheme is, a grapheme.
Yes.
Oh, I love that one. It makes it so easy to understand. Anyway, I digress. So I was very drawn to her Instagram account from the information she was sharing. She also shares a lot of good information about dyslexia, executive functioning skills, accommodations in schools, assistive technology. I mean, just wonderful stuff. So if you don't already follow her on Instagram, make sure you do. And her handle is @barely_articulating, and barely is BEARLY. Right, Jeanette?
Yes, you are right.
Okay, good. So we'll repeat that at the end too, but I just wanted to put that out there in the beginning. So I reached out to Jeanette. I asked her to come on the podcast. We had a few years back a previous episode kind of introducing early literacy skills, explaining what dyslexia is, kind of what to look for in older kids. And I wanted Jeanette to join us to talk more about some of those early signs of dyslexia in the younger kiddos. You know, we can identify dyslexia much sooner than school. Well, we can identify it earlier if we know what to look for at young ages, even preschool, sometimes even toddler ages. So Jeanette's going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about executive functioning skills and what those are, and how we can be looking for in toddlers and preschoolers that those skills are developing, and how we can help those skills develop, and why those skills are so important. So again, both areas that are very interesting to me on a personal note and a professional note, because this is great information for early intervention practitioners to know and be aware of, to share with the families we serve, and then great information for families to know as they work to help and advocate for their child. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get down to it. So Jeanette, you and I know that because we have an understanding of dyslexia as professionals now, that dyslexia is really misunderstood in general by the majority of the population. I myself didn't really know anything about dyslexia until my son was diagnosed with it. I knew a little bit, from my background as an SLP, but I still thought it was something with vision, seeing letters backwards, writing letters backwards. That was about all I knew. And I mean, I'm embarrassed to admit that, but it's just the truth. I worked in EI. I didn't think I needed to worry about that. And then boom, I had a kiddo that was diagnosed. So can you give us a better, a friendly definition to help everyone understand what dyslexia is, and really how complicated and how many layers there are to it?
Okay, absolutely. I'd be happy to give you all a brief breakdown of what dyslexia is. When I think of it, I tend to look at the etymology of it. And it helps me as I am defining it to understand or to acknowledge that dys and lexia are Greek words meaning difficulty and language. So it's a lifelong language-based learning difference or difficulty, and it's often called a disorder. So you'll hear some people say, speech and language disorder or language-based learning disorder, but all in all, it's genetic. It represents a spectrum of severity, and it compromises a child's or an adult's writing, reading, listening, and speaking. You will see it annotated on IEPs as SLD sometimes, based on the district, based on the state. They identify it as a specific learning disorder. So the hallmark of dyslexia is difficulty with associating letters and sounds, which inevitably impact all of the things I mentioned, writing, reading, listening, and speaking. So you mentioned about like seeing the words backwards and thinking that it was maybe a vision disorder. I think those are very common misconceptions. What we find is that individuals are spending so much energy on trying to read and trying to decode that a lot of times they start manifesting the letters in different ways. And so that is why you will see people describe it as seeing words upside down, backwards, or in reverse, because individuals are really spending and exerting so much energy into reading that sometimes they're making themselves I won't say dizzy, but they're kind of putting themselves out there to an extent where some discrepancies are out in the world and out and about in those letters.
Right. And for children who are, have dyslexia, the cognitive energy, the mental capacity they have to exert to decode the words on the page into the words, into the sentences, into the story, that cognitive fatigue occurs, and then that makes sense, right? When we do anything when we exert extra energy into any activity that we're doing, and we do it for so long, parts of our bodies start to do wacky things too, right? So that I like how you explain that, because the vision piece is there. There's something sometimes with, seeing things differently, but that's not the only characteristic. So, and just like you explained, I knew it had to do with reading, but I never put the pieces together that it, until my son again had to do with, it would also affect his spelling. It would also affect speaking, like I never thought, oh, word retrieval, like attaching sound to letters, so yeah, all of that made sense. And hindsight's 2020. I can see how that all evolved for him from toddlerhood forward. But that was a great definition. Thank you. So it's way more than just seeing letters upside down or backwards. It's a much more involved language disorder, as some people like to call it. So thank you for that definition. So when are children most commonly diagnosed with dyslexia?
So statistically, 92% of those who can be identified as having dyslexia are between the ages of 5.5 and 6.5. So it's easier to detect as they get older. However, there are signs and indicators as early as 1 to 2 years of age.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Well, we're going to have to talk about those. So yeah, I don't know that I knew that it was that young we could see some signs. So, okay, so share with us some of those early indicators, early signs and symptoms that we might see.
So some early indicators, as you stated, would be and I'm going to look at that 5.5 to 6.5 age range, because I know they have that 92% area of identification. So I'll say some easy signs, hallmarks, indicators would be that they would spell phonetically and inconsistently. They could read or reread with little comprehension. There's difficulty putting thoughts into words. I know we were talking about those word retrieval disruptions, like they will know the word, think the word, but saying the word, there's a disconnect somewhere in their process of actually saying it. And something that I found very intriguing when I have worked with dyslexic individuals is that they have trouble with copying, writing and copying. Like, so you'll write something on the board. It can be short, it can be long, but you'll write something and then you will ask them to rewrite that same something. And it would be such an arduous task, or they would get frustrated. And for me, before I even really understood what dyslexia was, I was like, what's going on here? Like, is this laziness? Is this like, some type of a behavioral component that's happening? But it was never any of those. So it was actually very enlightening when I began my journey with learning about dyslexia, that I saw that this has nothing to do with behavior or laziness. It was more about the fact that they were having trouble with writing and copying. So
yes, I know that a lot of children with dyslexia have dysgraphia too, and that's that
yes,
writing piece that
yes,
can be tricky for them. So kind of that would probably be the piece that accounts for that difficulty with the copying of something, that
mhm,
breakdown between there. Okay, so those are some of the things we look for in that when 92% of the kiddos are diagnosed between
mhm,
5.5 and 6.5. So what are
right.
even some earlier signs before age 5?
Okay. So the earliest signs, as I stated, of dyslexia can emerge around 1 to 2 years old, when children first learn to make sounds. Children who don't say their first words until 15 months of age, um, or their first phases into 2 years of age, have a higher risk of developing or showcasing dyslexia. So for our kiddos in that early intervention stage, we are looking for their ability to learn and make sounds. And if they're not doing that in a typical or an average milestone basis until about 15 months of age, then we can start to see, those flags. And I don't want to necessarily call them red flags, but we are getting those indicators that show us like, hey, something more could be on the horizon. Take a further look.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Okay. So that might be one of the first things that
Mhm.
brings
I
dyslexia to
also,
our mind. Yep. Go ahead.
yeah, Lacey, I also think about like family history. That's certainly a large component of dyslexia, because as I stated upon, defining it, it is genetic.
Mhm.
So if there is a parent who struggled with the reading, writing, speaking, and listening, and all of those great things, then it is likely that they will have a child that struggles in that capacity as well. And we know that dyslexia is really just starting to be something that we're talking openly about. So maybe if your parents were born in the 70s or the 80s, that wasn't really, and maybe even the earlier part of the 90s, that wasn't really something that we were able to label and put a name on. So they may have gone undiagnosed. And I
Yes.
think that's what we see a lot of children with dyslexia. And that it has that genetic component, and mom and dad are saying, well, I don't think I have it, or brother and sister or anything doesn't have it. So there's that anomaly, like,
It still could be genetic, just undiagnosed, like you said.
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So don't write it off if grandpa didn't get a diagnosis, or if dad or mom doesn't have a diagnosis. It could still be a possibility.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else we can look for in those young ages or watch for?
I would say those are some really, really great indicators there. Just that family history, and whether they are having trouble with learning and making those speech sounds. That's
Okay.
going to be really, really important at that time.
What about and I'm not sure about this, so correct me if I'm wrong. Is it difficult for children who have dyslexia or maybe don't have that diagnosis yet to remember the months of the year or recite like memorized things like that? Do they have a more difficult time doing that?
So there are some other indicators that I could mention that would make sense, like being unable to recognize rhyming patterns,
Yes.
mispronouncing familiar words, or, kind of using baby talk a little further beyond that time frame where baby talk is acceptable. As you stated, having issues with remembering months of the year, having problems learning and remembering the names of letters in the alphabet, difficulty learning the words to common nursery songs, being unable to recognize the letters of their own name. And that's something I've seen on so many occasions where the child is unable to recognize the letters of their name. And usually what's happening is the teacher is modeling or providing them with information, an exemplar of their name on a regular basis, and they're still unable to recognize it. So you're just like, what's really going on up here?
Right. Yeah, because that recognizing their name, definitely they do that in preschool. But even before that, if they're in a daycare, they might, their name might be above their little cubby where they put their lunchbox and backpack and coat or whatever. So that recognize their name, kiddos have exposure to that really early on. So after, a couple years of that, if they're still not getting it, that certainly could be concerning. I remember with my son, my daughter was born first and she does not have dyslexia. And then when he came along, he talked a little bit later than her, but still within the normal range. So I wasn't worried about that, no indication of being a late talker. But then as he got into the preschool years, he wasn't interested in learning his letters at all. Wasn't interested in singing his ABCs, had trouble reciting the days of the week, learning them in preschool. But I would talk to friends about it. I talked to my mom about it. Everybody, he's a boy. He just likes to run and play and jump and kick and be silly. It's okay. It's okay. And I just kept pushing it back in my mind too, kind of, giving that justification to myself. Oh, he's a boy. He'll learn. He's just not ready. The brain isn't ready to learn to read until 6 years of age. Someone told me. So I, hung my hat on that, on that hook for a while, like he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. But the thing that, and I don't know if it was just timing or so much repetition, and I was strict with screen time. My kids didn't get a lot of screen time at that time as preschool toddler age, but he finally learned his letter sounds from this Leapfrog video, The Letter Factory. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or familiar, but I think what clicked was it was visual, but it was also sensory. It had movement, and all the sounds did a silly movement and made their sound while they did their dance. And so he was able to imitate that. So it made those letters come alive for him. It wasn't just something that was, one dimensional on the paper or on the poster at preschool or whatever. So I that was very eye-opening to me at the time. But again, dyslexia was not on my radar yet, but again, when he got his diagnosis later in second grade, and I sat for a minute and looked back on his language development, on how, he developed those preschool skills, those literacy skills, I started seeing things that made sense, but again, I didn't know. So
absolutely. I can certainly understand. And I will say that it is such a unfortunate event when people are told to wait and see, because that can truly be detrimental. I think that as parents, we definitely have to tap into our intuition more, because we will take all the unsolicited advice and do all the things when in our heart of hearts, we need to just listen to what we believe to be true. So I would just kind of make that statement, because I know so many parents, and even because I do a lot of work in foreign countries or world countries, because I don't really like saying foreign, but and I will find that there is a whole lot of wait and see, and that's never something that I would stand behind.
Yes. And, with much respect, teachers teach all types of learners at all different levels, right? And if they aren't educated on dyslexia or don't really feel comfortable recognizing those early indicators, they may not see it as that as soon as the parent might see it as that. So, I always encourage parents, educate yourself, feel empowered to advocate for your child if you need to. Don't wait for somebody for things to go south, or for for the kiddo to fall behind a grade level in reading, a couple grade levels in reading. Go ahead and, advocate and try to get them to take a closer look if you feel like something else is going on. Because again, I deeply respect teachers, but certainly, just like in the world of speech language pathology, they've got so much on their plate, right? There's so many things they're trying to look at. There's so many kiddos they're trying to help and reach. And so yeah, parents, learn as much as you can, advocate for your kiddo, never be afraid to do that. So, okay. All right.
Yes.
So talked about some of those early signs. Amazing that we can see some of those early indicators as young as 1 year old. So that's awesome, and just a good thing to be aware of. So dyslexia, it often coexists with other diagnoses, other learning challenges, learning differences. I know you can't name them all, but what are some of the more common diagnoses that exist alongside of dyslexia that you see?
Well, you mentioned one earlier, and it was dysgraphia. That is a common coexistence between the two. Also, dyscalculia. We can see ADHD, and with that, there's about a 60% chance that if someone has dyslexia, they also have that particular comorbidity of ADHD. And I want to say those are some of the more common. Also, there is a strong correlation between dyslexia symptoms and deficits in short-term memory and executive functioning. So a whole lot happening there. I would say probably the two that you'll see the most would be executive functioning and ADHD, though.
Okay. And can you explain, we talked about what dysgraphia is, and that's difficulty with the actual, task of writing and getting information onto the page. Explain quickly what dyscalculia is.
So dyscalculia is going to be basically the same as dyslexia, but with math. So think of having issues with computing numbers, understanding processes, gaining foresight into exactly how these different equations work. So it's really deeply rooted in math, and that is something that is pretty popular within those with dyslexia. So you will see a lot of dyscalculia. And I actually have an assessment. Well, it was more like a screener for it, where I had to do some research on exactly what people with dyscalculia experience. And again, it's basically understanding the steps in the math process. They may not understand when they're looking like what needs to be done next. They have issues with transposing numbers. And overall, they just struggle with computation.
Okay. And then you mentioned ADHD, attention
deficit hyperactivity disorder. Yes. And that has a really large prevalence. And I was talking to a good friend of mine today, and I was saying, ADHD is really starting to be, it probably always has been, but I think the pandemic has certainly heightened up what we're seeing, because I think some people were able to mask it a bit better. But when you were at home and you're working from home, and it's just a lot of distractions, a lot of inattentiveness happening there. And one of my good friends, she was just diagnosed as an adult with ADHD. So it's really starting to be the water cooler conversation, so to speak.
Yeah, right. Yes. And it's a lifelong thing too.
Absolutely. There is medication that some people will say is helpful for them in that regard. Then there are some different coping mechanisms people use. So it's kind of one of those things like choose your adventure,
Right. Figure out what helps you the most. But it's interesting, people not getting diagnosed until they're adults.
Yes.
They would have had it their whole life, but maybe have been able to cope without without those symptoms really standing out enough to need the referral to, or the diagnosis.
Yeah. And I know we're talking about dyslexia and ADHD and a lot of comorbidities there, but I've also seen, from my professional experience, a lot of adults being diagnosed with autism now. And I'm like, wow, this is just mind blowing, because I really would like to know what was being done, throughout their school years. Then they weren't able to get those accommodations and modifications like they needed to. So I know there are some horror stories out there with that regard, because now as an adult, it got to a point where it was like at a fever pitch. They had to figure out what was happening. And then they find out, hey, you've had this lifelong neurodiversity all along. And you're like, what? So I think, and I don't want to blame everything on the pandemic, but I will say a lot has come out because we have been isolated. I will say that.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Yep. Okay. So you mentioned, in kind of listing some of those more common comorbidities with dyslexia, you mentioned executive functioning skills as, again, being something that can coexist with dyslexia. Can you elaborate and explain to us what executive functioning skills are, and then how difficulty with these skills can impact a child's learning and development?
Awesome. So I would be happy to explain executive functioning skills. So simply put, it's a set of mental skills that include working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. We use these skills every day to learn, work, and manage our day-to-day lives. But I don't know if we just know that, hey, I'm using my executive functioning skills today. So
only if we're not using them, we get called.
Yeah.
We're supposed to know how to do it and do it.
So yes, indeed. Trouble with executive function can make it hard to focus, follow directions, handle emotions. And those are just among some of the more common things that you'll see when someone has trouble with executive functioning skills.
Okay. Working memory, that's something I've seen in my own kids. I've seen my own kids struggle with that. And what can you explain to us what working memory is, what that means, and how that looks for a child if they don't have strong working memory skills?
So absolutely, I can definitely break that down. I know that working memory is part of that short-term memory, and it's concerned with immediate conscious and perceptual processing. So that's going to be, I would just say that if we are comparing the two, working memory and short-term memory go hand in hand. They are synonymous with one another. So if you know about basically kind of having that immediate memory at hand, then that's exactly what it is. And I would say that it's undisputed that children with dyslexia have deficits with the phonological processing and storage, and that is also correlated to that short-term memory. So that's that central executive functioning, and impairment of any of these skills can really impact the intellectual ability of someone and their language capacity. So okay, I just want to kind of throw that on out there. You can see some skills that would include maybe difficulty with planning and organizing, trouble with identifying what needs to be done, and making things precedent. Now, I actually will say from my own experience, I do have trouble with when I'm given several different items or tasks to complete. I have trouble and I struggle with what needs to be done first. So that is an executive functioning issue right there. So problems with determining the sequence of accomplishment. And that's another thing, like, all right, so what should be accomplished on this list of lists? Difficulty with carrying out steps in an orderly way, difficulties even beginning tasks, problems with maintaining attention, having issues with evaluating how one is doing on a task. So if someone would say, how are you doing? You're not even able to articulate how you're doing. You may not even understand whether you're doing a poor job or not. It's like, so I was given all of this, and So I started doing this, and so executive functioning is truly something that I think we don't talk enough about.
Yes, I would agree. And so following multi-step directions,
Mm-hmm.
verbal directions,
Mm-hmm.
that's a breakdown in working memory, correct? Like, for example, sometimes I'll say to my kiddo, go upstairs and put your shirt away. And when you're finished with that, you need to come back downstairs and sweep the floor. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And that second step, that again, I've said this long string of directions, but the first step might get done, but the second step gets lost in translation, or he isn't able to hold it in his memory long enough to
Mm-hmm.
remember to do it next. So I've kind of learned that those types of directions are difficult for him because he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have the working memory challenge for him to hold all that
Yes,
information. He does
that's
better
a
with a
great
written
example.
list. What's that?
I see that's a great example of a
Yep.
working memory task. Holding a person's, like I even think of holding a person's address in mind while listening to instructions about how to get there. Like it's a lot happening. So your
Yes.
son heard that first part and he's figuring out what steps he needs to take to get that first part accomplished. And then you're hitting him with a whole nother set of steps. And he's like, oh, but I'm still thinking about part one. And
Yes, exactly. And that, going back to what you said a few minutes ago about giving somebody several things to do at once, but then the difficulty in prioritizing, I see that too.
Yes.
And that, I mean, in schoolwork, that is, wow, I mean, that's really hard then
Yeah,
for these kiddos that
it
struggle
is.
with
It
these
is. But you know what I find, that when we set accommodations for one student, it is usually helpful for all students. Because when we think about, let's say, that age range of early intervention, early childhood, EI, I think about, like, when we're giving them 3 and 4 and 5 different tasks, that's quite a bit for them. So if we break it down and we're showing visuals and we're giving them step by step and we're talking to them about what's more important, and we're modeling for them, and you know how important repetition is, it's just, I think it'll be better for all kiddos,
Absolutely. Accommodations for all. That's what I say.
Oh.
I know you say that too. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It could help. It could help kiddos that have an official diagnosis or have an
Mm-hmm.
official, somebody saying they're struggling with executive functioning, and
Mm-hmm.
the kiddos that are falling through the cracks, quote,
Yeah.
quote, or a kid that's just tired that day and needs a little more visual support to
Come on.
understand what's being said. I, I
Agreed.
I definitely agree. Okay, so any specific examples how struggling with executive functioning skills might impact a toddler? So 2, 3, even preschool age kiddo. What are they going to have difficulty being able to do in the preschool classroom, or what are they going to have difficulty doing at home that maybe a same age peer might not have difficulty with?
So I would definitely say that, again, going back to sequence of steps, they're going to have issues with understanding and acknowledging the sequence in which you provide them steps to complete. They will probably have issues with maintaining their attention to a task. They will have issues if you ask them particularly about how they're doing with something. They may not understand how to evaluate themselves and say, oh, I'm doing well, or I don't know. So those would be some things that I would see mainly with that younger group of kiddos. But we definitely want to make sure we're placing them in some growth promoting environments where we're using scaffolding to help them practice those necessary skills before they perform them alone. So we want to make sure that we are definitely building our kiddos to be independent, but we're not just throwing them out there and say, do this, you saw me do it yesterday. It's all about that scaffolding and that practice so that they can perform those skills alone. So adults can facilitate the development of a child's executive functioning skills by establishing like routines, creating and maintaining supportive, reliable relationships. And going back to what I said about modeling, you want to model that behavior. You want them to see it for themselves. And always we want to focus on repetition, because that's going to be important at that early age.
Yes, and how they learn best through repetition and daily routines from primary caregivers and family.
And I think you mentioned something earlier about having visuals around. Those are like a true golden mark, to have visuals handy so they know. I've seen a lot of times with individuals on the autism spectrum who are using communication boards, how visuals can be extremely effective, and how schedules that are depicted through illustrations are really, really helpful. So even with typically developing kids or kids with executive functioning disorders, those type of accommodations, so to speak, could be extremely beneficial.
And visuals in daily routines, I find, also support independence.
Yes.
You can put, and it doesn't have to be a fancy drawing, cartoon drawing, doesn't have to be real photograph drawings. Just 3 little steps: put toothpaste on your toothbrush, brush your teeth, put your toothbrush away. If 3 little pictures posted on the bathroom mirror, then that kiddo can walk through those steps of brushing their teeth. At 2, 3 years old, they feel good about themselves. That's when they're craving independence anyway. So again, back to that, accommodating everyone is a plus. Whether they're struggling with the sequence of events within the daily routine or not, it's going to help every child to just become more independent and kind of learn that, how to do things themselves and within daily routines. You mentioned earlier, and I just want to circle back around for a second, executive functioning skills are learned skills. Is that right? We're not born with the ability to just know how to do these things, right? It's practiced over time. It's people model for us, scaffold the learning. Over time, we learn it. Some kiddos, it might just take a little bit longer. They might need a little bit more support, but these are learned skills. And I just wanted to circle back around because just recently I did a podcast with Michael Powell, a psychologist, and we talked about tantrums, and he was saying how impulse control is a learned skill and how self-regulation is a learned skill. We aren't born with the ability to control our reactions. Toddlers are impulsive, and it's because they're still learning that skill of impulse control. And toddlers aren't born with the ability to soothe themselves or regulate themselves when they're upset. So that is also a learned skill. So I just wanted to bring that back up, that we're not born with all these wonderful skills that we magically, it's not magic that we just grow up into adults and everything,
I'm so glad you brought that back up and circled back around. These are neurobiologically based skills that involve mental control and, as you stated, self-regulation. These are not things that we are born to do. We have to learn these things. So yes, that's a great point.
Yeah. And it's just important for us to remember that, certainly we all have our days where we have less patience, but I think, the more we know, the more we understand about the developing child, the better then we are able to support and empathize with, what they're going through or what they're struggling with. So I try to share that with the families I serve as much as I can. And I try to keep it in my own mind for my own children. But I have my ups and downs, we're all human, but yes. Okay. All right. So we kind of talked about, if we have a young kiddo that toddler age, preschool age is struggling with executive functioning skills, kind of how that might look in day-to-day routines. Did you have any other examples that you wanted to share under that question?
At the top of my head, I am trying to think of some ways in which a toddler would struggle. I would say, I'm thinking about school, and when I say school, I know at that age they're going to daycare, but I was a parent that made my son believe that he was going to school regardless of his age. He knew that this was school because I was preparing him for that. So even at that age of 1, I'm thinking about ways that parents can essentially prepare them for daycare the next day, like knowing their schedule and understanding what it is that will be happening throughout the day and preparing them for that. So maybe we could circle back around and I'll think a little harder on that.
Sure.
particularly.
Well, and you mentioned too, attention span is something,
Mhm.
that can kind of be an indicator of struggling with executive functioning skills. And I think, depending on the experience of the parent or caregiver of the child, sometimes that stands out pretty easily, especially if you have a kiddo within a group of same aged peers and you notice that Johnny doesn't seem to stay with the puzzle long enough to complete it, but his other friends
Mhm.
do. Or Johnny
Right.
switches activities. He can't even get through a board book with you because he's up and moving on to something else. So I feel like that one we do notice maybe a little bit more than others, because when we get a kiddo side by side again with peers, and we can kind of see the difference there. But there's
Right.
definitely things we can do to work on that and help that child develop that skill as they get older. But okay, so we'll come back if you think of anything else. So again, the next question I feel like we've talked about too, how families can support the development of executive functioning skills. Like
Mhm.
you mentioned, visuals are great.
Yes. In those growth promoting environments and doing some scaffolding. So yes, we kind of chatted about that briefly. I think visuals, as I stated, I can't state it enough how important they are. So if you are a parent and you are not using them, you are going to need to start as soon as possible. After
Yeah.
this is over, this podcast, you need to be doing some visuals. And that may mean you need to go online and spend some time printing stuff out, cutting it, or maybe you're fancy and you can draw it yourself. But
Whatever, however it looks,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter as long as it serves that purpose for the child. And visuals, my goodness, we talk and talk about them. We've done a few podcasts, how they support receptive language, expressive
Mhm.
language, and communication. Now we're talking about how they support the development of executive functioning skills. So yeah, the benefits of visuals are really endless. And
Mhm.
again, yes, please, when you get off here, if you don't have visuals yet, like Jeanette said, hop off this episode, and go make some visuals. Okay.
Get to it.
All right. So if listeners would like to, further their knowledge about dyslexia or about executive functioning skills in this younger population, do you have any recommendations of resources, websites, continuing education courses that they could check out that you can recommend?
Yeah, so I will say two of my favorite go-tos would be Dyslexia Help, which is ran by the University of Michigan. I am a Michigander, so that had to be my first one. Then Yale University has a Center for Dyslexia and Creativity, and that is a great resource as well. Both are places where you can go online and grab information. So is Understood. Understood is probably definitely in my top three. Understood has info about all of what we discussed: dyslexia, executive functioning disorders, or executive functioning skills, um, ADHD, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. They have articles and insight on all of that. And I just found a website for Harvard University, Center on Developing Child, and they have some gems on there. So definitely check out those university sites. And then Understood is a nonprofit, if I'm not mistaken, but their information is rich, and it is certainly something that you could make great use of.
Absolutely. And this is this wasn't in the lineup to talk about, but I saw something I think on your Instagram or your website today that I know you agree with me on this. So
Mhm.
I just want to clarify for the audience. So there's eye reading and there's ear reading. And by ear
Mhm.
reading, I mean listening to books. Is
Mhm.
one better than the other, or are they both beneficial to the child?
I will say that ear reading is what is done before eye reading is even a part of the equation.
Yeah.
So I think that ear reading is certainly something you want to do immediately.
Yeah.
And then eye reading is to follow.
Yes.
That's the sequential order of things.
I had never thought about that, but when we're reading to our babies and toddlers, they're listening,
They're
right? I mean,
listening.
I knew they're
They're
listening, but
listening to the the prosody. They're listening to, our pitch, our tone, our pauses. All of that is just being grasped by these sponges. And then after that, we're doing that print awareness. So we're like using our fingers, and they're seeing like, oh, the words go this way, or the letters move in this direction. And then essentially we're getting them to develop those speech sounds so they can say the words. So yes, ear reading is definitely top tier. And then next, you want to focus on making sure they're able to articulate those sounds.
Right. And start reading more independently with their eyes, of course. But I want to encourage parents, if you have a child who's maybe struggling to learn to read, or isn't picking it up as quickly as you think they should, or that they think they should, and they're becoming discouraged, introduce audiobooks. I mean, keep them interested in listening to books and, learning, hearing stories, and do it with them. Learning Ally is an online audiobook. They have tons of books. We belong to it. It's wonderful. But I don't want parents to ever think that ear reading or listening to audiobooks is less than
no.
Because kids can learn. Again, they can stay interested and excited about reading and books, and that's what we want. We don't want to lose that motivation for them. So I just want to encourage them too.
We build the momentum by ear reading, and then we carry it out by eye reading. So a lot of accommodations you'll see for dyslexic elementary, middle, and high school students would be that they could use audibles or audiobooks. And so a lot of times they carry over that skill set where they love to read, but they like to listen to it so that they can comprehend what is being said or what is happening. I swear by audibles. That's all I really listen to. And if you are connected with a public library, then there is access to sites like, or apps like Hoopla. And it's another one, I always forget the name of it, but free audibles and ebooks. You said what?
Tumblr? Is there one? I think
I think it might be on my phone, but it's just so irritating because I always forget the name of this one. And I'm not going to be able to find it probably while we're talking, but Hoopla, Hoopla is certainly one that I would highly suggest. And you can hop on it if you have a library card, and you have access to thousands of audibles, ebooks, and resources that will help you as you are really training your child and starting with that love for reading by using their ears. YouTube has great educators on there that will read stories. If you're having a hard or a long night and you're like, I don't feel like cracking a book open, well, crack the computer screen open and watch somebody read a quick short story. I'm a fan. I certainly will sit here with my son, and he is 8, and we will watch somebody read to us on YouTube.
That's wonderful. And listening to books in the car,
yes.
We listen to Harry Potter in the car. We drive 3 hours to get to grandparents' houses, and, giving them something else to do and look forward to in the car, and listening to the book and working on the comprehension. Yeah. So
bring that book bin in the car too. It's waiting for you.
Yeah.
Fresh new books.
That's right.
Adventures.
Yes, exactly. Okay. I just wanted to throw that in there because in our experience, kind of learning more about audiobooks and accessing them more often, I just want to encourage parents and just to let them know it's not less than if your child is listening to a book versus actually reading it. It's totally okay.
Yeah. And essentially learning to read starts with your ears, not with your eyes. So that's our takeaway for you.
Yes, I love that. I never thought of it like that, but you're exactly right. I love that. Okay. So you shared those great resources with us. Where can our listeners reach out to you if they have a question for you, or certainly I know they're going to want to follow you on Instagram at Bearly, Bearly, articulating, but you also have a website. Can you share that with us?
So absolutely. And my company is called Barely Articulating, and it's Bear with the little pandas, Bearly, articulating. And so you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook, as well as you can locate me on my website using the same information, Barely Articulated. You just need to hit that search bar, just type it in, and then you'll see some little bears and me, and then you have been, you've located me essentially. So
good, track you down. Good.
track
And
me
can they
down.
message you on social media? Is that the easiest way for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't mind at all. I get, sometimes it depends. Like right now, I think I'm not in the weeds, but sometimes I get in the weeds and I have to pace myself answering questions. But right now, I think I'm free and clear. So if somebody wanted to hop in my DMs, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, a good time to reach out to Jeanette. Next month might be a different story, but
Okay.
this month is good. So, okay, good. Jeanette, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to share what you know about these areas of development and this diagnosis of dyslexia and executive functioning skills. And we just hope that, what you shared reaches families that need to learn more about this, or it reaches families so that they can help their child, again, understand better and then advocate better for their child. And all the practitioners that are, therapists or practitioners that are listening, we hope that you take this information and share it with the families that you serve. So thank you so much for your time and for being here.
You are very welcome. It was such a pleasure speaking with you and with your audience. I feel like we had a great dialogue, and I'm hopeful that this information will have fallen on active ears and people will go out and make these necessary changes to make sure that their babies and their kiddos are, meeting all of the benchmarks and milestones.
Absolutely. That's what we hope for too. Yes. Okay. Thank you everyone for listening. And if you liked the episode, we would love for you to leave us a review on iTunes or Podbean. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Milestones Miracles and on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks. Thanks, Jeanette. Bye-bye.